Hi, my name is Peter Ackerley. I'm the founder and CEO of Alpha Genius. We've realized that we've really got to get rolling with our social media campaign and start getting vlogs and blogs out there. If you visit our blog site at www.learnwithpeter.com, you'll see some stuff that we already have up there. But we're really going to try to step up the tempo on that. And this is the first video that I'm really referring to as a vlog because you'll see I'm not really putting a lot of effort into the production here. Behind me, actually, interestingly enough, behind me is, these are called, actually they call them akahon, red books in Japan. These red books are the books that the kids use to study for the exams. Each university has its own style of exam, and all sorts of research has been done into ways to get the ways to pass these exams, and so the kids study those books. One of the things that Alpha Genius is trying to do in serving foreigners is advertise Japan. It's part of what we're trying to do in terms of attracting the best teachers for our Japanese English learners, but probably you're in touch with us right now because you want to learn Japanese. You're an English speaker that wants to learn Japanese. And the population that we would really like to serve would be people that really might consider staying here long term. The truth is, you won't learn Japanese in any appreciable way unless you're really thinking of building a life here, of building some kind of a career out of knowing Japanese. And it used to be that the only people that really developed Japanese proficiency were the people that were kind of linguists, had a passion for language itself, and really got into careers like translating and interpreting. So a very small set of society, of humanity. But things are changing. Japan really is a great place to live. There's so many reasons why it's a great place to live. If you go to my blog, you'll see me listing those things out. People are asking me to tell the story of how I came to interact with Japan and the Japanese language. I got my master's degree in teaching English as a second language from St. Michael's College in Vermont. And a lot of my classmates actually were Japanese. And so I started studying some Japanese with them. And actually, I sort of had an academic interest in it. It was intriguing to me. It was very hard, and this was true for me as well with French when I studied French. It was very hard for me to really picture myself actually being able to deploy the language that I was learning. But as an academic study, it was interesting for me. When I started coming up on the actual trip here, studying language started to become something I was doing as part of a larger set of sort of arming myself for my trip here. I had heard that this place doesn't understand foreigners. I just heard that all the time. And I heard that you can get lost here and you'll encounter nobody who can help you out. I heard that you'll be starved for things Western. That might actually have been true a few years earlier than when I came over. I came over in the year 2000. And I remember I brought over stuff that I wasn't even particularly passionate about, but which felt very American to me. So I brought over Prince's Ultimate Collection, the musician Prince. I brought over all sorts of books that just felt very American to me. I felt like I was going to need to steel myself against the experience of being immersed, that I would need to have a refuge. And I guess that was true. But very shortly after I got here, the internet began to pick up as a form of engagement overseas. So I remember my sister, when she was in France in the 1980s, she would really try to get a hold of a telephone to call mom, and it was really, really hard. She'd send letters, and I'd send letters, and I just remembered she was really isolated in France. And I have never really been, I mean, in life, one gets isolated. That's just part of being a human being. And I think here, when people encounter culture shock these days, at least, it's really more human shock. Human beings are very different from each other. And by extension, Americans, I'm an American, Americans are different from Japanese, but it's only an extension of that basic human difference. You can find like minds here, some of whom will be from your own country, but you shouldn't assume that someone's your friend just because they're from your home country. I think in the past, um, foreigners did tend to glom onto each other because they were so starved. Um, and these days, it doesn't quite work out that way. There are lots of English speakers here. So I do remember when I first got here, being terrified that I'd drop my key and then I wouldn't be able to explain to anybody what the problem was. I wouldn't even be able to ask them where the police station was. I remember things like that. I do remember going to the video store a lot, just to see stuff and being frustrated that there wasn't enough American stuff. Um, I used to be so snooty about films, um, and it was so hard to find good American films. Eventually, I just took whatever there was. I went through all of the really really old stuff, and then I started doing the crappy new stuff. Um, the At that time in the 2000s, really the tastes here in American movies were pretty, um, well, pretty poppy, I would say. Um, these days, though, you get movies everywhere. You can get any kind of movie you want. You can get any kind of well, not any kind of TV, but you can get most of the TV shows that you want here. So it's just a totally different dynamic than it used to be. I'm really reluctant to make broad sweeping statements about Japanese culture because cultures change and this one changes fast. I'll say a couple things. One, Japanese TV and the Japanese talent machine, the way it's set up here, um, really for some reason does not produce a lot of quality. And it's not because there aren't talented Japanese people. I think some people think it's because organized crime is heavily involved still with the entertainment industry. And it just really causes television to be, well, it causes adult television to be kind of lame. I think children's television is actually pretty good. Generally speaking, I think I like what I see my kids watching, at least early in the morning, the shows that are really made to educate kids. It's good stuff. There are cartoons that irritate the heck out of me. Um, but the thing that really irritates me about TV here is just a lot of the stupidity that I see on TV. And it's sort of like, gosh, I hope not too many foreigners see that kind of TV stuff because it makes Japan seem very, very shallow. And these are not a shallow people. So that's one thing. The other thing is, I think I knew this going in. I mean, I think there was a strain within the general assessment of Japan that included this as a concept. But I wish I had been more keenly aware earlier on of how profoundly civilized this country is. Um, it's just a good word to describe this country. It's civilized. Everything they're trying to do, everything they're doing, is really pushing in the direction of creating a better and better civilization, sort of embodying the ideal of civilization more completely, however we may define it. Um, Examples of that. The famous picture of, it's called Hachiko Crossing. It's the street in Shibuya that you see pictures of, where it's a huge intersection and everyone's crossing at the same time, and it looks just incredibly chaotic. If you're in there, it's amazing how careful everyone is not to bump into each other. It's amazing. Another example, Civilization. We're all on the trains together. It is very crowded in there. It could be a heck of a lot worse than it is on the crowded trains. In fact, when people ask me these days what my favorite thing about Japan is, I do tell them the trains, because I just think it's beautiful that they all ride the trains together here. We all ride the trains together here. I feel very much a part of the workforce in Japan. I feel like I'm part of the same project with everybody because I ride the trains with them. And I just think that's incredibly beautiful. So, you know, before you get too much into your first wave of culture shock, really start and really notice those aspects of Japan that are just profoundly civilized, because those are not rose-colored sunglasses. That is the truth. And when I think about the Japanese economy, sometimes I think that there's a reason for the Japanese malaise. The reason why it doesn't grow as aggressively as an economy as the United States does. It's because being a child in Japan is not as dangerous a thing as being a child in the United States. It's because the prospect of old age in Japan is not so terrifying a thing in Japan as it is in the United States. It's because when you're rich in Japan, you can't lord it over everyone else quite as much as you can in the United States. And if you're not so wealthy in Japan, you don't get stepped on quite as hard. And falling behind in Japan doesn't mean half as much as falling behind does in the United States. This is what I mean. You might visit as a tourist, but this is the kind of society that world citizens usually really want for human beings in general. It's the kind of society that a lot of us, as I'm speaking for myself as an American, are trying to build back in our home countries, but never quite getting there. I mean, I have a friend who is a Christian, and he was telling me something very interesting. He was saying a lot of the things that Christians advocate doing, caring for the poor, not responding to violence with violence, not stealing, not cheating. When you find something that has been lost, figure out who its owner is and get it back to them. These are things that Japanese people do by second nature. It's a good country. You might end up living here.